course, we're just checking out the skin. This one is pretty obvious because we can see it. It's one of the most obvious parts. I can grab the skin mostly separately. I'm going to get like some of the fascia that's attached underneath there as well, but we can lift that separately. And sometimes we'll find like a lot of information just in the skin. Like right here we've got, you can feel this tension pattern coming up toward the ear. Can you feel that? That's mostly just in the skin. And we can go deeper and be grabbing more deliberately into the fascia itself. And roll that up and get that separate grab, right? And then of course we can pick up the fascia with the movement around, sliding over the top of the underlying structure. So here we have a pretty complex underlying structure, so it's fairly easy to distinguish how the fascia is sliding over all this musculature and bony landmarks and connective tissue there. And we can get down into the bone. So I'm going to just kind of sink straight in, and usually the rest of the tissue will actually yield a bit and flatten out as we dive into it. And so now I have two different bone points here. I'm on the zygomatic arch of the skull and also the mandible. And here we have the joint of both of them together, where the mandible is coming into the rest of the cranium. I'm going to give it an extra second to sort of yield there because there's a lot. And almost everybody is going to have this in this location where there's really a lot of tension and activity in the muscle over the joint here that's operating it. The mandible is really, really powerful. And so that needs a lot of musculature around it, but I can still get some traction, like palpatory traction, into the bone itself. And if you're like settled in, which it feels like you're dropping into a pretty easy low state, straight through the muscle I'm actually moving the bone here slightly. Can you feel that like relative motion between those points of the bone? Eventually we'll get into like the different panels of the cranium because there's the different plates which actually also move relative to each other. And that's like cranial-sacral technique kind of stuff, is about that really subtle movement between the bones. Then diving into the musculature, I'm going to grab for that more specifically. And so now I'm like wrapped around this muscle, and like you were looking at the way that the fascia and the connective tissue has a lot of kind of complex interactions with the muscle. It's part of how the muscles manage themselves in space. And so I'm also having an impact on this connective tissue as well. But I'm here in the belly of this group of muscles that's operating the mandible. We can get into the terms for all that later, but you can just feel what's going on with the muscle itself. This is kind of a fun one. You can get to the muscles of the inside of the jaw through here. And it's also possible to access that from inside the mouth, and that's something to keep in mind all the time. The whole body is 3D in space, so we actually can get to muscles from a lot of different angles that aren't obvious when we're just looking at the charts. I want to get to a tendon, but it'll be harder to distinguish the tendons at the jaw itself, so I'm going to come up into, these are really short, small tendons But as I'm diving into the very upper attachments of the muscles of the neck, you can feel kind of a transition between the belly of the muscle, which is like the more meaty tissue, and specifically like the thickest point on a given muscle. So this one will be a little bit further down, but I'm still on like muscle fibers up to here. But then I'm going to cross into this more like tendinous material, connective tissue, exactly at the attachment of the skull. Now, other places on the body you can have some pretty long tendons. The forearms specifically come to mind, where there's a muscle belly and then a long tendon before it does its action. And so tendons are defined by attaching the muscle to the bone. So only connective tissue that's running from muscle fiber into osseous tissue or bone counts as a tendon. But you have other connective tissue that's like structurally almost identical, and like for our purposes it's functionally very, very similar. And that's the ligaments. Ligaments run from bone to bone. And so from where we're shooting this, the ligaments that we have are going to be really up in the spine, and I would have to work down these muscles to get a really specific grip. But there's little ones between each of the vertebrae throughout the spine. I'm pausing because I'm like tuning into your body and dropping into my like internal perception. Long gaps there. And it'll be easier for us to get a really good grip on ligaments at places like the knee, where that big bone of the thigh, the femur, is attaching into the somewhat smaller bones of the calf. There's a lot of ligamentation there, and like the larger joints generally it's going to be easier to find, so we'll come back into those spaces and I'll point them out when we get there. We already kind of cruised through the fascia. We have, I'm going to skip the retinaculum for right now. We'll come back to that when we're doing like the ankles and wrists, is where those are going to be the easiest to find. But there are a lot of blood vessels in the neck. Just kind of spooky ones.
I was kind of getting the heebie-jeebies earlier when I was reading about it.
Oh yeah, totally.
I was like, why is this giving me anxiety?
Yeah. Yeah, so working into the neck, we're going to be able to detect the carotid artery, and I'm not going to put pressure here, but with this like really subtle, like I'm barely indenting the skin here, I'm going to pick up your heartbeat, and that'll lead me straight to the carotid artery. And so we got access point where the muscle bellies that are running through here, they're very protective, and this is a big part of why people's necks lock up so hard, is that we have this intense protective instinct on the carotid artery, which is the blood supply to the brain. And so can you feel the way that your like heartbeat is kind of echoing on my finger here? It's not really proper for me to take a pulse with my thumb, but I can distinguish your pulse from my pulse, and you might be able to also distinguish our two pulses there. And I'm never going to work the carotid artery, but being able to tell where that's coming from obviously will keep you safer. And as we get into like fine palpation and deeper tissue work, we'll be able to distinguish the blood vessels the arteries, which are carrying the blood away from the heart, versus the veins, which are carrying it back towards the heart after it's already kind of run its course. Bursaw, we're not going to jump on any of those in the head, but the nerves of the head are pretty interesting and easy to find. We've got kind of my personal favorite, the trigeminal nerve, is going to come off of actually lower in the neck and run back up into the face. And it's got kind of a 3-pronged layout where it's going to run through a lot of the face. So this is what's innervating the majority of facial expression. And because it comes out of the neck, it can be compromised. That's a really common condition, especially when people have to like emotionally suppress a lot for this nerve to get impinged or compromised, which will cause like numbness and tingling and a certain amount of like paralysis even in the facial expression. So right around here, I'm on the branches of that nerve. And if it's inflamed, it'll be like pretty easy to pick up. Here it's like falling right under. Does that track for you? Like, yeah, the sensitization of like where exactly that nerve is lying. Versus like off away from it. Like right here, there are nerve endings that are feeding back into that main thread. And I will show you the like image of if you just strip everything away and only leave the nervous system on a body.
I don't know if you have or not, but I feel like I have seen an image.
It's pretty fascinating. It basically looks like a cotton candy person, right? Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. Maybe I've got one of those tendons that's really like standing up more too, so that's a good place to feel it. Yeah. And then we've got lymph tissue. So this is just like a really quick cruise over of like stuff that we can feel rather than trying to like learn all the systems right now. But the lymph tissue that's in our shot right now, there's lymph all the way through the body. It's just like the juice that's flowing through everything. But at certain points, we're going to have these lymph nodes. I'm going to just dip you a little bit to get them to kind of pop out more. And you're not super sick right now or anything, so they're going to be on the subtle side. But if somebody is fighting an infection, they're going to be really easy to find because they like engorge significantly, and the tonsils and adenoids are part of the lymph system of the head. And then we've got some of these little nodes. So there's really nice access on the carotid artery right there. And so these are going to feel like teeny tiny little balls. Your immune system is in actually pretty nice shape right now. Anyway, your lymph nodes are in pretty nice shape right now. Have you had anything removed?
No.
So we've got like one little set here. Through this area, they'll be like clustered. But there are random ones just all through the body, just kind of woven in and out of lots of different tissue. So I don't know, are you able to pick up that sensation of the lymph nodes? It's usually like a little bit, like almost repulsive. Like if someone's right on a lymph node, you're like, ugh. Yeah. And then the adipose tissue is like, we're not going to find a lot of like fat cells that are distributed through, like they don't go away, and like if you like gained 150 pounds, like
I'd have met
they
fat.
would just change and be easier to find, more visible, but they are there, and like under all the skin, anywhere that has that like really nice kind of soft space in the face, like really, like right here we've got sort of the most adipose tissue we're gonna get in the face right now. And then we're back to the bone, so that's like the contrast. We've got that little pocket right there.
Grandma squeezing the cheeks.
And then we can get back into, here's the bone, back onto the adipose, back onto the muscle, back up into the skin. It can just be like really light, only on the skin, moving just skin, and you can drop into the fascia and move skin and fascia together over the muscle. And that's basically the starting point on palpation, using the head to go through the tissues.